Welcome to Fabric Monday. Today we start a series of videos about Eventhouse policies, and we'll talk specifically about the retention policy. What is this? What am I talking about? Eventhouse is the object in Microsoft Fabric which contains custom database. And we use custom database as the best database to ingest real-time data. So we make real-time ingestion inside custom database. And what are these policies? So policies, Eventhouse policies execute complex management tasks in easier ways. Tasks that would be way complex to execute, they make it easier for us. Let's understand how these policies work and how these policies work in Microsoft Fabric. Here we have an Eventhouse containing a custom database. Inside the custom database, at the database level, there are some policies that we can define for the entire database. At the top, on the command bar, we can see an option called Data Policies. Here are some policies we can define for the entire database. The two policies that we can define for the entire database, they are the retention policy, our subject today, and the caching policy. Well, it's interesting to mention what is the caching policy. Let's take a look on the system overview. The system overview tells us how much of premium storage we are using, and we are using 100% of premium storage. I mean, all our data is stored in premium storage. This can also be called as hot and cold storage. So the premium and standard storage, hot and cold storage. And this storage is defined by the caching policy. By setting the caching policy, we can define that older data should go to a cold storage. What benefit we get from it? The cost. The cold storage costs less, but the difference in cost is so small that I don't recommend using the cache policy. Leave the data in the hot storage, there is no problem. So this policy exists, but it's a policy that I don't recommend to be used. The retention policy, on the other hand, is another story. When we deal with real-time data, we always create some kind of summaries. We always summarize the data. We always aggregate the data in a way to view what exactly is happening at that moment. And for this aggregated data, we don't need to keep a long history of that. After we saw what was happening at that moment, we drop it. We don't need the data. We need to keep a long history of data, probably most of the time, but not the many aggregations that we make to build the real-time visualization. These we don't need to keep. That's where the retention policy comes in. But that's also why I don't recommend to use the retention policy at database level. In my personal opinion, it doesn't make sense to keep a retention policy for all the data in a custom database. You need to make this individual according to the table, according to what that table contains. So you need to define the retention policy at the table level. How we do that? Here we have a query set linked to this Eventhouse. And here you can see the instructions to set the retention policy. Alter table, text rights, my table, policy retention, soft delete period, 35 days. So I'm asking to retain the data for 35 days. So in this way, every information older than 35 days will be deleted. Of course, this is a simplification, because this involves a lot how the data is stored in custom. In custom, the data is stored in extents. We can see the extents of a table using the show table, the name of the table, taxi rides, extents. So we can see the extents of the table. Looking to the extents, we can see the max created on. This is the maximum date of the records in this extent. Then we see the size of the extent. So we have the information about the extents that exist in the taxi ride table. And we can even see, according to that retention policy, which extensions will be dropped. The extension from 20 of February and the extension from 21 of February, they will be dropped. They have too old information. They will go. But is this immediately? In the moment that I create this policy, will this data be removed? No. No, it will not. What will happen is that in the moment I create this policy, the retention is marked with an expiration date. And the process of removing the extension happens in an asynchronous way. So we can tell exactly how much time after the policy is effective the extension will take to be removed. It's not possible to tell that. So in this case, I created the policy retention for the taxi ride table. If I would like to see this policy, show table taxi rides policy retention. I'm asking to show the retention policy in the table taxi rides. So it's telling me that the policy is set. Here is the policy. The policy to keep the data at most for 35 days. In this way, we can control the amount of time we keep our data. And when dealing with real-time ingestion, the amount of data we ingest is a lot. And many times we build aggregations and summaries that work only for a specific window of time, only for a while, for us to see immediately, and they don't worth anything else. So we can drop them immediately, instead of having to develop something to automatically delete. We have the retention policy. We set the expiration time on the data using the retention policy in custom. Thank you very much for watching and see you next week.